Hello, 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 beautiful people, and welcome back to another Career Gems for the Journey live with Leah C. Murphy. And I am Leah C. Murphy, and we help talented professionals build thriving careers. And I am hype today. So, you guys know I like to live my authentic truth. I'll tell you when I'm excited, and it often is when I'm coming on this platform because I really love to be able to bring tailored content specifically for career that folks are looking for that I feel like it may be missing in the market. Or even if it's something that you may have heard before, but I have my own additional layer of perspective that I want to add onto it based on my experience and years of coaching executives and leaders throughout organizations. So I'm thrilled that you're here with me today. If you're here live, please do drop your city in the chat so that I can shout you out, acknowledge you. We're streaming live to LinkedIn as well as YouTube. And if you are on the replay, I love that for you. I also love that for me. The replay has been doing some amazing things and growing leaps and bounds. So we're coming off a real amazing high. If you're following me on all the social platforms, whether it's LinkedIn or Instagram, that's really all the place that I have the capacity to be social on. You will know that we are just celebrating 100 episodes of the Career Gems for the Journey podcast. So I'm super excited about that. 100 episodes of the Career Gems for the Journey podcast. So for those of you who have been riding with us for a long time, joined us in the podcast early on in the trenches, I am so grateful that you have chosen to follow this career journey experience that I'm on, that I am really hoping I can continue to drop gems for you and continue to make valuable podcast content for you. And a little bit of the backstory why I think it's important and I want to share today is 100 episodes. Apparently, I learned this later on in the process. Number one, 100 episodes is a huge milestone. There are so many podcasts that essentially die well before they reach 100 episodes. So kudos to those of us who have actually done the work to get to 100 episodes, but more shout out to you all who are consuming this content and putting it into action, applying it to your needs so that you can have tailored advice that supports you. Shout out to you all for riding with us and for participating. So I didn't even realize it. What you guys may learn about me throughout the way that we've been able to engage and connect is I tend to operate on what I think is the best asset or investment for the individual, for the community that I'm creating, for my one-on-one clients. So the way the podcast started was very organic. So it wasn't this idea of, I want to be rich and famous and I want to, start a podcast, because richness and fame does not come with that. So the reason or the original motivation was there were so many people who were reaching out to me looking for career coaching and advice, but they didn't have the budget available to be able to pay for my services. So I didn't want to turn everyone away all the time. I definitely had this heart and passion to try to give back to individuals, but I had to be realistic about my own capacity and what I could do. So I said, well, then here's what I'll do. I'll start a podcast. And at that time, I started with my co-host, Amma Gordon. Shout out to Amma, who was really in the trenches for the early stages of the podcast with me. And we said, we'll start this podcast, focus on career, and we'll give it away. It'll be available on every single platform, and we'll make sure that anyone who wants this authentic storytelling, career coaching experience and advice in the form of a podcast with guests and interviews, and we'll make it entertaining as well as informative, can have it. And that for me really, it felt like a calling. It felt like that was something that I was responsible for. So I did that, started that work. Amma and I were in the trenches. We started the podcast, editing ourselves, doing all the work ourselves, coming with the ideas, producing it, all of the things. And now here we are 100 episodes later, and none of those things are a part of our day-to-day for either of us anymore. So it has grown because you believe in it, because you believe it was valuable. But I also want to tell you something else. There was a period of time where I was prepared to sunset the podcast. And this story is one that I haven't shared publicly. So I'm excited to be able to share it with you all today because I think it's important and it's relevant. So stay with me. It'll come full circle. So there was a time where I was going to sunset the podcast. It was taking so much time and effort and energy to create the podcast that I started to get concerned. Was I over investing time into the podcast and not in the other areas of the business? Now, again, the podcast is free. The Career Jump for the Journey podcast is free and it gets distributed wide. So we were not making any money off the podcast at that time. So I went through a stage where I was saying, maybe I should sunset the podcast because it's not the revenue that's generating as a result of the investment just wasn't working. I'm an entrepreneur with a small business. We had a really small team. So I was thinking that the podcast may not make sense to stay with. Then I realized that I needed to get some external advice on this topic. So I reached out to other experts who are in the space, trusted advisors, coaches, if you will, to ask them their perspective on, does it make sense to keep the podcast? Where do you see the next phase of this going? Here's what I'm struggling with. And I got that tailored advice, and that advice made all the difference to me in the world. Because after talking to those advisors, those business experts, those industry leaders in the work that I do and in the podcasting space, what I learned was it did make sense for me to keep the podcast, and I had to reframe the way that I was using this asset that I had created. I had to reframe the way I saw the podcast, reframe the way I positioned it in my business, but also reframe the way I saw the investment of time that I was making in creating the podcast. Now, I had to do this with very little applause, right? This is before we were at, we might have not been past 50 episodes. So I totally understand how podcasts can die short of 100 episodes. We weren't at 50 yet, but I believed that it was something that was a great investment. I believed it was a resource that people need. I believed in the purpose behind it and in the mission that I had started the podcast for. And those collaborations and that advice really helped me to get back to what my original objective was and be able to turn down some of the noise that I was creating in my own head. And it wasn't like it wasn't valid reasons why I was thinking about sunsetting the podcast. They were completely valid reasons, but they weren't aligned to my bigger business goal and objective. It was very focused on a very narrow window of time where, as an entrepreneur, I was just feeling overwhelmed and I was trying to renew some of my own capacity and trying to figure out the ways to be able to do that. So I want to make sure that we think about our careers in a similar way. When we're thinking about this bigger long-term career journey and this entire perspective that we are doing the work every day to be able to create, I think oftentimes we should think about it like the podcast. One, there will be windows of time where people are not applauding. No one's noticing. No one's acknowledging all the hard work that you're putting in. No one may even mention that there's an investment, or there may be very few people. Maybe it's just your friends and family. For a long time, it was my friends and my parents listening to the podcast. So much so, and this is funny to share, my daughter started telling me, "Oh, Mom, I hear you editing the podcast on a regular basis." So I started listening to the podcast. Oh my gosh, the absolute love I have for her. So just this idea of, I'm doing the work, I'm making the investment, it hasn't gotten the traction that I was looking for. Should I invest that energy elsewhere? But what I didn't recognize was that building, that seasoning, that process of navigating the podcast and all of the work was a training ground, was a foundation that I was building so that I would be able to operate on other platforms in the future. Now we operate on YouTube and LinkedIn Live. Now I speak at large events. Now I'm a keynote speaker for corporate clients. All of that came from a foundation of navigating the creation of the podcast. So the podcast itself was an investment in the future of my business and the future of the work that I get to do on a regular basis. Now that I'm so grateful for. And if I hadn't done that work, if I hadn't toiled for hours at night, and I started the podcast when I was still working for another organization, that work over time, doubling with a full-time job, really fortified my desire to be an entrepreneur and to build out the Career Gems for the Journey business and services that we provide across our offerings. So it has been a foundational tool that has gotten me to a great place. And now here we are celebrating 100 episodes of the podcast. Now we're winning awards, where all kinds of great things are happening. But that wasn't the case for episodes 1 through 20, maybe even 1 through 30. So I want to tell you all that only because I treated the effort and I stayed in it, I treated the effort like it was something that was going to be highly valuable, that it was going to be something that would be celebrated and acknowledged. And I did that before the views, before the downloads, before the accolades and the acknowledgement. And a lot of times that's what's required in our careers. We are in a season where we're doing the work, we're building credibility, we are gaining skills that are necessary, that are transferable, that will benefit us later in our career. And that work is sometimes unacknowledged or very under-acknowledged. And I'm here to tell you that I understand. I know that feeling. I understand that it could be frustrating. I also understand that sometimes it requires an investment of time and money that you may not believe you have. And those sacrifices for me have come back and really paid dividends. So, like I said, I was editing the podcast by myself initially. Then we invested in editing software. Then we invested in a podcast producer. Then we invested in a podcast manager. And only then did we see the numbers and the growth and the change in the podcast. And that time was a sacrifice. There was some trade-offs that I had to make in order to continue to make that choice. And I'm here to tell you that I want you to do the same for your career. Last week, we even talked about, we're going to be at the Penn Women Conference. That's going to be November 7th, 2024. We're going to be a vendor in person at the Penn Women Conference. And that conference is something that is a full circle moment for me. I went as an attendee years ago. Now I'm coming to be there as a vendor. I couldn't get that out at the conference. So really a full circle moment. But I was talking last week about how do you get your employer to potentially invest in sending you to the Pennsylvania Women Conference or conferences similar to it, wherever it makes sense for you to develop your professional career. And I got some feedback from folks to say, my manager is not supportive, or I'm not sure how to go about it. I don't even know how to ask. And what it led me to is sometimes it requires you to invest in yourself before the company fully recognizes you're an asset. That investment in yourself, and you can start small. You can start with webinars. You can start with in-person conferences. You can start with networking events in your city. All of those things require you to invest time in yourself, and they may cost you a few dollars, or they may cost you a lot of money, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. But I'm here to tell you that those investments will pay off in the future. The skills, the relationships, the network that you're able to build as a result of you making that investment in yourself will pay you dividends in the future if you're able to stay the course. So I'm here to encourage you to stay the course on the things that are important to you. I'm here to encourage you to stay the course on developing yourself and building out your career. I'm also here to tell you that getting trusted advice from advisors, from experts in the space, from coaches is the game changer and the difference maker that many of us can continue to tap into more and more. And I want more of us to have access to that, which is, a full story, full circle moment again on why I started the podcast, why I started doing the work on LinkedIn Live on YouTube, because I believe these things are valuable and I believe more of us need to have access. And I want more women and people who look like me to have the opportunity to think about these opportunities as investments in themselves. So if you learn anything from me in this experience, if you take away anything from this particular episode of Career Gems for the Journey Live, I want you to take away that first, your story matters. The work that you're doing is relevant. It's important. It's having an impact on someone. I had no idea that my daughter was listening to my podcast. I had no idea that she was that impacted by hearing me do the work and seeing me up early on Saturday mornings doing the work to edit the podcast. And you'll hear it in the early episodes. The early episodes were raw. They were rough, and it got better over time. It progressed. We continued to invest. We continued to grow our following. We continued to grow the technology and the services that we were able to provide tied to the podcast. So it has paid so many dividends. And here we are celebrating 100 episodes. And I'm just grateful. I'm grateful for the advice. I'm also grateful to be in a position to share what I learned from my own story with you in a tangible, evidence-based way. This is not something up in the sky, something I heard about. This is something I actually lived in my own business that I pulled from my own career. So there are still on the regular daily basis people who reach out to me through the podcast, make comments, share episodes with me on social media that helped them, that were impactful to them. And I am still gratified every time that I hear it. And now the other parts of my business that continue to grow because I was able to use the podcast as a springboard would not exist had I not done that work and laid that foundation. And now here we are 100 episodes later. So I wanted to share that story with you all because I think it's important to understand that sometimes we are operating under the shadow of the moonlight. We are operating in our moonlight season, and that means we are working at night. We are getting up early. We are making that time investment. And there aren't a lot of people there to be able to acknowledge, to celebrate, to applaud for us. And I'm telling you that the sun eventually is going to come up, right? We know that the next day is coming. The sun will come and we'll be operating in our sunlight, in our daylight season, where there are opportunities for acknowledgement, but we have to do the work before that acknowledgement comes. A lot of what we see today is a very instant gratification culture. We joke about baby boomers having the perspective of hard work and needing to toil for a long time into businesses and into working in organizations. And there's something to be said about that. There's also something to be said about optimizing and using systems and using technology to your advantage. So I think it's a both and, right? As a millennial who is in community with other millennials and Gen Zs, as well as Gen Xers, as well as Gen Alphas, right? There's something good to be able to take from all of those perspectives, but we won't always have the applause to motivate us. So the discipline, the commitment to the cause, the commitment to the mission is sometimes all we have to keep us motivated and doing the thing. And that discipline, that commitment, that resiliency to stay put is something that we are investing in, something that is for us or that is a part of us, not a part of some other prioritized thing. Those are the things that will pay us dividends in the future if we stay with it, if we stay committed to it. And for a lot of us, this idea of how do we make the decision, do I stay committed or do I walk away, is something that we need to have a discussion about more regularly. So if you're thinking about navigating something that is important to you or an organization that you want to stay with, a job you want to evaluate, this is the time to reach out to get that expert advice. This is the time to get out of your own head and to connect with someone who can give you guidance and support in your decision-making process. I did it as a part of and I'm a business owner. I am a career coach. I am all the things that we've talked about, but I still need to get advice. I still need to get insight from trusted advisors. I still need to talk to coaches. I'm still doing the work too. So I want to make sure that I encourage everyone. We are never done growing. We are never done learning. We are never done evolving. I hope we're never done, because as soon as we stop evolving, then we are left behind. So as you think about developing yourself and developing your own career and making commitments and investments to yourself going forward, understand that there will be some things that work, some things that don't work. Shed the things that don't work. That's fine. That was a lesson. But also there's some trusted advice that you may need to get from outside of your own perspective to help renew your commitment to the cause, to the mission that you are passionate about. And I want you to put yourself in a position to win. If I would have given up, if I would have stopped recording the podcast, who knows where the business would be today. But because I stayed committed to it, because I got good advice and I was willing to listen to good advice, and I was willing to adhere to what someone who was further along than me, who had more expertise than me, said, I was able to stay the course and put myself in a position to win and put my business in a position to win. And I want to encourage you to do the same for your career. Put yourself in a position to win, continue to invest in yourself, even though there may not be any applause, even though the recognition and the acknowledgement may not be there, it's not there yet. If you stay the course, The right people will come your way, but only if you're putting yourself in a position to win. We're going to talk a little bit more about putting yourself in a position to win next week, because I think that also comes along with some visibility. And I want us to be able to dig deeper into what putting yourself in a position to win in your career on a regular basis looks like. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that the next time that we're together. I am thrilled and I'm still so grateful that we have gotten to the 100 episode milestone. And I appreciate all of you who have rode with us for the entire Career Gems for the Journey podcast, and everybody who has just gotten on board. Maybe you heard about us through LinkedIn or through YouTube or another channel, and you're just getting to kick it with us. We appreciate you riding with us from this day forward. So before I let you go, here's our call to action. You can join our newsletter, the Career Gems for the Journey newsletter, where you will find out about all the new things that are happening in the Career Gems for the Journey organization, and you'll get that first. Our newsletter comes out before any of our other content, so you will keep your finger on the pulse of all things that are happening on this side of our organization, as well as career tools that are cultivated, specifically designed for you. So go head over to gemsforthejourney.org and grab an opportunity to sign up to be a member of our newsletter community. You will not be disappointed. Also, if you are thinking about it, there are still opportunities for you to see me in person live, like a real human being, at the Penn Women Conference. It is the first time that I've participated in the conference as an in-person vendor, and I'm so excited for it, but I'm a little bit nervous. I would love for all of you who are listening here today, or all of you who are listening on the replay, to join me, to meet me in person. It would make me feel amazing if I could hear from folks like, oh, Leah, I've been listening to your podcast and I came here. It would literally melt my heart. And there's going to be so much value that happens at the actual conference. We have giveaways, we have books for sale, we're going to have career tools, we're going to have all the things happening. So it'll be a great investment of your time. So I would love to see you at the Pennsylvania Women's Conference on November 7th. And we'll be dripping out little bit of information about our booth, our location. We'll be sharing all of that process with you as we go forward. So I'm excited to see you all there. So until the next time we are together, please do make your journey work for you. I'm looking forward to being with you next Tuesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And while you're here, go ahead and download and subscribe to the Career Gems for the Journey podcast. We would love to continue on this journey with you.